After the death of her mother-in-law, Valeria came to the reading of the will, where her husband and mistress with a newborn were waiting for her. But when the lawyer read out her mother-in-law's last words, "The story I am going to tell is based on fiction, and does not reflect real events. Enjoy listening." The news of Doña Carmen's passing crashed over Valeria like a tidal wave, sweeping away the fragile calm of an ordinary morning. She staggered, her hand clutching her chest as if to steady her racing heart, the weight of the loss pressing down like a stone. Though Carmen had been frail and battling illness for years, her death felt like a sudden theft, a cruel interruption that left Valeria reeling. They shared no blood, yet their bond was woven from years of shared confidences, quiet laughter, and unspoken understanding, a connection deeper than that of many mothers and daughters. Carmen had been Valeria's lighthouse, seeing in her a quiet resilience, a boundless empathy, and a tender warmth that even Valeria's husband, Javier, had consistently overlooked. With the devastating news came a formal, embossed letter summoning Valeria to the reading of Carmen's will, stirring a complex brew of grief, curiosity, and a faint flicker of hope. Valeria had no illusions of grandeur. She expected no inheritance. Her only desire was to honor Carmen's memory with the love and gratitude that had defined their relationship. The day of the will reading dawned bleak and sodden, the sky draped in heavy gray clouds that wept relentlessly, mirroring the sorrow pooling in Valeria's heart. She chose a simple black dress, its austere lines a quiet armor against the nervous tremor that pulsed through her. As she approached the law office, her umbrella shielding her from the drizzle, she paused on the rain-slicked cobblestones, drawing a deep breath to anchor herself. Then her eyes lifted to the stone steps leading to the entrance, and her breath caught. There stood Javier, his familiar silhouette a painful reminder of better days. But he was not alone. Beside him, exuding a smug confidence that bordered on arrogance, was Sophia, a young woman with bold makeup and an air of calculated charm, her presence as vivid as a flare in the gloom. In her arms, she cradled a swaddled infant, its soft, plaintive coos piercing the damp air. Their child. The sight struck Valeria like a physical blow, her world tilting as the truth she had long suspected was laid bare. She had sensed Javier's betrayal in the late-night phone calls, the evasive glances, the growing distance between them, but to see it confirmed so brazenly, in such a raw and unguarded moment, was like a blade slicing through her heart. Sophia's gaze met Valeria's, her eyes glinting with cold, triumphant malice, as if proclaiming her victory in a war Valeria hadn't chosen to fight. Javier had always seen Valeria as mundane, a quiet shadow too meek to match his ambitions. He craved someone like Sophia, bold, cunning, and unrelenting in her pursuit of status. Nausea churned in Valeria's stomach, urging her to turn and flee, to erase the searing image of their betrayal from her mind. But a deeper force, pride, defiance, or perhaps a desperate need to confront the truth, rooted her feet to the ground. She wouldn't let them see her break. Not today. Not ever. Summoning every ounce of resolve, Valeria straightened her shoulders and climbed the steps, her heels clicking with deliberate precision. Javier and Sophia parted to let her pass, their mocking glances and whispered smirks cutting like shards of glass. She refused to meet their eyes, focusing instead on the ornate door ahead, her dignity a fragile but unyielding shield. Inside, the law office was a study in muted elegance, its walls lined with dark wood paneling and shelves of leather-bound books. A receptionist greeted them with a practiced nod, ushering them into a sterile conference room where the air thrummed with unspoken tension. Javier and Sofia took seats across from Valeria, their presence a constant irritant, like a splinter beneath her skin. The room was oppressively quiet, save for the steady ticking of an antique wall clock and the faint scent of old paper mingled with polished mahogany. Valeria clasped her hands tightly in her lap, her knuckles white, willing herself to focus on the grain of the table rather than the weight of their stares. At last, the lawyer, Señor Morales, cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the heavy silence like a blade. "We are gathered here today," he began in a measured, professional tone, "to read the last will and testament of the late Doña Carmen López. Present are all relevant parties, her son, Javier López, his companion, Sofia Rivera, and Valeria López, Javier's wife." The word wife landed like a stone in Valeria's chest. Legally, she still held that title, but their marriage had crumbled long ago, its foundation eroded by Javier's faithlessness. Señor Morales abrió un cuaderno de cuero, extrayendo un manojo de documentos notariados crujientes. He adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, his eyes scanning the pages with meticulous care, before addressing the room again. "Before I proceed with the reading of the will, I must inform you that it is accompanied by a personal letter from Doña Carmen, which I will read following the formal bequest." He cleared his throat once more, his voice steady as he began. "I, Carmen López, being of sound mind and unwavering resolve, hereby bequeath all my movable and immovable assets." He listed the estate with clinical precision, a grand apartment overlooking the city's historic plaza, its windows framing cobblestone streets. A charming villa nestled in the rolling hills, surrounded by olive groves, substantial bank accounts reflecting years of careful savings, and a portfolio of stocks that promised financial security. Valeria listened as if through a fog, the details blurring into an almost surreal tapestry. She had never imagined herself tethered to such wealth. Carmen's fortune belonged to a world far removed from her modest life. Then came the moment that shifted the axis of her existence. "All aforementioned assets," Señor Morales continued, pausing for deliberate emphasis, "I bequeath to Valeria Isabel López." A stunned silence enveloped the room, so profound it seemed to hum with its own energy. Valeria's breath caught, her mind scrambling to grasp the words. Everything to her? Javier and Sofia exchanged incredulous glances, their faces a kaleidoscope of shock, fury, and disbelief. Señor Morales pressed on, unmoved by their reactions. "In the event that Valeria López declines the inheritance, it shall be transferred in its entirety to a charitable foundation dedicated to supporting children battling cancer." Valeria blinked, the haze in her mind clearing as the weight of Carmen's decision settled over her. She had no intention of refusing, not out of greed, but because this was Carmen's final act of love, a sacred trust she felt bound to honor. Javier shattered the silence, leaping to his feet, his voice trembling with rage. "This is preposterous," he roared, his face flushed with betrayal. "My mother would never do this. It's a mistake, a fraud." Sofia joined him, her voice shrill and venomous. "This is a scam. This lawyer's been bought." Señor Morales regarded them with unshakable calm, his gaze steady over the rim of his glasses. "I understand your shock," he said evenly, "but the will is legally binding, duly notarized, and fully compliant with all regulations. You may challenge it in court, though I must warn you, your chances of success are negligible." Javier's fists clenched, his knuckles white, his face a storm of humiliation and fury. He had been certain the inheritance was his by right. a birthright owed to him as Carmen's only son. The idea that Valeria, whom he had always dismissed as a quiet, unremarkable shadow, would inherit everything was an affront he couldn't process. "You manipulated her, didn't you?" he snarled, rounding on Valeria, his eyes blazing with accusation. "You played the dutiful daughter-in-law, whispering lies to turn her against me." Sophia grabbed his arm, her voice sharp. "Javier, stop making a fool of yourself." But he was beyond reason, his pride in tatters, his anger a wildfire consuming all restraint. Señor Morales raised a hand, his tone commanding authority. "Please, maintain decorum, or I will be forced to summon security. As I mentioned, there is a letter from Doña Carmen. I believe it will shed light on her intentions." He retrieved a single, slightly yellowed sheet from the folder, its edges worn from careful handling, and began to read, his voice now softened by a trace of melancholy. "My dearest Valeria," the letter began, "if you are hearing these words, I have left this world. I want to thank you with all my heart for the love and care you showed me. You were not merely my daughter-in-law, you were the daughter of my soul. You tended to me in my darkest hours, brought light to my days, and loved me with a purity I can never repay. I know Javier has caused you profound pain, wounds I wish I could have healed, but I have unwavering faith in you, Valeria. You are strong, wise, and worthy of joy. I want you to embrace it, to build a life that reflects your radiant heart." The lawyer paused, his voice catching briefly as he steadied himself. "Javier, I am deeply disappointed in you. I know of your affair with Sophia. I know of the child you share. I do not judge you, but it breaks my heart to see how you betrayed Valeria. She was a devoted wife who loved you with every fiber of her being, and you repaid her with deceit and scorn. I cannot entrust my estate to you. I will not allow it to fuel your reckless pursuits. Instead, I leave it to Valeria, to give her the foundation for a new beginning, a chance to find the happiness she deserves. Farewell, my son. I pray you one day see the error of your ways." Tears streamed down Valeria's cheeks, silent and unstoppable, as she absorbed Carmen's words. She hadn't known the depth of Carmen's awareness, nor the fierce love that had prompted such a decision. Javier sat frozen, his face drained of color, the weight of his mother's disappointment crushing his carefully constructed illusions. He had always believed himself her cherished son, certain she would forgive his flaws. Sophia's expression hardened, her dreams of a lavish life crumbling like sand through her fingers. The room was cloaked in a heavy silence, each person lost in their own storm of emotions, grief, betrayal, and reckoning. Valeria met Javier's gaze, her heart a tangled web of pity, anger, and a stubborn fading ember of love. She knew forgiveness was a distant shore, unreachable across the chasm of his betrayal. Señor Morales stood, closing the folder with a quiet snap that echoed in the stillness. "The will of Doña Carmen Lopez has been read. If there are no further questions, you are dismissed." Sophia, who had been simmering with resentment, exploded. "How is this possible?" she demanded, turning on Javier with venom in her voice. "You swore everything would be ours. You said your mother adored you, that she'd never abandon you." Javier stared at the floor, his silence a confession of his own delusions. He had believed his charm and lineage would secure his future, but now he stood exposed, stripped of his arrogance. Sophia's fury crescendoed. "You're a pathetic failure," she spat, shoving him aside with a force that sent the infant in her arms whimpering. "I don't need a man like you." Clutching her child, she stormed out, her heels clicking furiously against the hardwood floor, leaving a trail of scorn in her wake. Javier made no move to follow, his spirit shattered, his world reduced to ash. Valeria watched the scene unfold with a strange detachment, her pity for Javier laced with a quiet contempt. He had reaped the consequences of his own choices, and she refused to bear the weight of his regret. Coming to himself, Javier approached her, his eyes brimming with tears, his voice barely above a whisper. "Valeria, please forgive me," he pleaded, grasping her hand with trembling fingers. "I was blind, a fool. I know I don't deserve it, but please let me make this right." Valeria pulled her hand away, her gaze cold and unyielding, a fortress built from years of pain. "Forgive you for what, Javier?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm within. "For shattering my trust? For building a life with her? For the child you share? There's nothing left to salvage." He sank to his knees, his voice cracking with desperation. "Please, Valeria, I'm nothing without you. Sophia's gone. I'm alone. Share the inheritance, just a fraction. I have nowhere to go. No one left." Valeria looked down at him, her heart torn between compassion and an unyielding resolve. She remembered the countless nights spent weeping into her pillow, the betrayal that had eroded her faith in love, the quiet moments when she questioned her own worth. "I see your pain, Javier," she said, her voice firm but not unkind, "but I won't carry your burdens. You chose this path. You destroyed your own life. I won't pay the price for your mistakes." Javier's tear-streaked face pleaded, his eyes searching hers for a glimmer of mercy. "Valeria, we were a family," he whispered. "We shared years together. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive me?" Valeria shook her head, her resolve unshakable. "I might forgive you one day, Javier, but I'll never forget. And I'm not turning back. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed yourself, our love, everything we built. Please, leave me in peace. I'm building a new life, one you have no place in." With that, she turned, her steps deliberate as she walked out of the office, the door closing softly behind her, sealing Javier in the wreckage of his choices. Outside, the rain had ceased, and sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the city's ancient streets. Valeria felt a profound lightness, as if shedding a heavy cloak that had bound her for years. Her life had transformed in an instant. Yesterday, she was a shadow, defined by duty and devotion to a faithless husband. Today, she was the heir to a fortune, the architect of her own destiny. She vowed to leave the past behind, to embrace a future unshackled by pain. With Señor Morales' guidance, Valeria navigated the labyrinth of legal formalities, selling the countryside villa and organizing the estate with meticulous care. He recommended a tranquil town nestled in a verdant valley, known for its serene beauty and tight-knit community, an ideal haven for a fresh start. Valeria rented a cozy apartment on the town's outskirts, its windows overlooking fields of wildflowers. She invested the bulk of her inheritance in a charming, long-vacant storefront in the heart of the town square. Once a quaint bookshop, its faded sign and weathered facade whispered of forgotten stories. Valeria saw its potential immediately, envisioning it as a warm, inviting cafe, a sanctuary for weary souls seeking solace and connection. The renovation was a labor of love, stretching over months as Valeria poured her heart and soul into every detail. She chose soft ochre wallpaper to bathe the space in warmth, commissioned handcrafted oak tables and chairs from a local artisan whose hands told stories of their own, and selected linen curtains adorned with delicate embroidery to filter the sunlight into golden patterns. She envisioned a haven where guests could escape the relentless pace of life, savor a steaming cup of coffee, and share stories that mended the soul. She named it Refugio, a word that captured her dream of comfort, belonging, and quiet joy. The opening was understated, marked only by a hand-painted abierto sign hung on the glass door. The first visitors, two elderly women from the neighborhood with kind eyes and curious smiles, arrived shortly after. They lingered over the handwritten menu, asking Valeria about her journey from the city to this quiet town, and ordered chamomile tea with almond pastries. As they savored their treats, one patted Valeria's hand and said, "This place feels like home, querida. Your pastries taste like my abuela's, warm, familiar, made with love." Valeria's heart swelled, her first triumph a quiet but profound milestone that anchored her to this new life. Refugio quickly became the heartbeat of the town. Young families pushed strollers through its doors, students pored over books at corner tables, and retirees sought quiet companionship over steaming mugs. Valeria made it her mission to know each guest, offering a kind word, a listening ear, or a gentle smile that spoke of shared humanity. She thrived, her spirit rekindled with every pie she baked, drawing from Carmen's cherished recipes, passed down like heirlooms. Her cinnamon-spiced apple tart, with its golden crust and fragrant filling, became the cafe's hallmark, its aroma wafting through the square and luring passers-by like a siren's call. Neighbors began to whisper of Refugio as the town's soul, a place where time slowed and hearts found peace. In rare moments of stillness, when the cafe was quiet and the last patrons had departed, Valeria reflected on Javier. She felt no bitterness, only a gentle sorrow, like the fading echo of a song. She understood he had authored his own downfall, and while she pitied him, she refused to carry his regret. One crisp autumn morning, as she polished Refugio's wide windows, the glass gleaming under her careful hands, she glimpsed a familiar figure across the street. Javier stood there, his frame hunched beneath the weight of time and remorse, his once confident demeanor replaced by a weary fragility. Valeria's pulse quickened, a flicker of old pain stirring, but she turned away, feigning indifference, her hands steady as she continued her task. Javier hesitated before crossing the threshold, the bell above the door chiming softly, a delicate sound that belied the weight of his presence. Valeria met his gaze with composed resolve, her heart steady despite the memories his arrival unearthed. The cafe's handful of patrons, regulars who had become like family, glanced up, sensing the charged atmosphere that hung like a storm cloud. Javier approached the counter, his voice rough with emotion, barely above a whisper. "Hola, Valeria." She remained silent, studying his face for a trace of the man she had once loved with all her heart. All she saw was a stranger, diminished by his own choices, his eyes shadowed with regret. "What do you want, Javier?" she asked, her tone even, masking the storm within. "I came to beg your forgiveness," he said, his eyes averted, his hands trembling slightly. "I know I hurt you beyond measure. I see now the pain I caused, the life I destroyed." Valeria's lips curved in a wry, bitter smile, her heart armored against his words. "Forgiveness?" she echoed, her voice steady but laced with quiet scorn. "You think words can erase what you did? You tore my life apart, Javier, betrayed me in the cruelest, most callous way. You built a life with her, had a child with her, and now you stand here expecting mercy." His voice wavered, thick with emotion. "I know it's meaningless now, but I had to say it. This guilt haunts me every day, every hour. I can't escape it. And what do you expect from me? She asked, her arms crossed tightly, a barrier against his pleas. Pity? Absolution? A share of what Carmen gave me? Javier shook his head, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. I just want you to know I regret losing you. You were the best thing in my life, Valeria, and I threw it away. For a fleeting moment, her resolve wavered, a pang of old love piercing her defenses. But she banished it, her heart hardened by too many lies, too many betrayals. It's too late, Javier, she said, her voice firm and unyielding. You destroyed everything we had. I've built a new life, a happy one, without you. He nodded, accepting her verdict with a heavy silence, and turned to leave, his steps slow and burdened. Javier, she called, her voice cutting through the quiet. He paused, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Don't come back, she said, her words measured but resolute. Don't disturb my peace. I've let go of the past, and I want to keep it that way. He offered a silent nod, his shoulders slumping further, and stepped out, the bell's chime marking his departure like a final note in a mournful melody. Valeria watched him fade into the autumn crowd, his figure swallowed by the bustling square. A final weight lifted from her soul, leaving only a profound sense of liberation. Turning to her curious patrons who had watched the exchange with quiet concern, she offered a sheepish smile. Sorry for the drama, she said, her voice light despite the moment's gravity. They responded with warm, understanding nods, their presence a reminder of the community she had built. Valeria resumed polishing the windows, the sunlight bathing her in warmth, illuminating her face with a golden glow. She was free, whole, and ready for the life ahead, a life of refuge, love, and boundless possibility. Months passed, and Refugio flourished, its tables filled with laughter, stories, and the clink of porcelain cups. Valeria's days were a tapestry of small joys, kneading dough at dawn, greeting familiar faces, and watching the town come alive through her cafe's windows. She had transformed from a woman defined by loss into one radiant with purpose. One evening, as she locked the door and gazed at the glowing Refugio sign, she felt a quiet certainty settle over her. This was her haven, her legacy, a testament to her resilience and Carmen's enduring love. The past was a shadow, fading with each new day, and Valeria walked forward, her heart